Every system begins with an intention, a problem to solve, a disorder to organize, a risk to contain. At their origin, systems are usually clear, limited, and purposeful. They exist to address something specific, to protect, to coordinate, to stabilize, or to distribute. Their rules are few. Their logic is understandable. Their legitimacy is rooted in necessity. Yet if history shows anything consistently, it is this. Systems rarely remain faithful to their original purpose. Over time, something subtle happens. The problem that justified the system fades, but the structure remains. What was created as a means slowly becomes an end in itself. And this transformation rarely feels dramatic. While it is happening, it feels normal. This drift is not the result of corruption alone. It does not require bad actors or secret intentions. In fact, it often emerges from the very logic that once made the system effective. To understand why systems drift, we must stop thinking in moral terms and start thinking in structural ones. Systems are not neutral. The moment a system is created, it reflects the incentives, limitations, and priorities of its designers. Even when built with the best intentions, it encodes assumptions about how people behave, what needs to be controlled, and what outcomes are considered acceptable. At first, these assumptions align with reality. The system works. It produces results. Trust grows, but success creates expansion. Expansion creates complexity, and complexity changes everything. As systems grow, they require layers: administration, oversight, enforcement, coordination. Each layer introduces distance between decision and consequence. What was once a direct response becomes a procedure. What was once judgment becomes protocol. Gradually, the system begins to respond more to its internal processes than to the external problem it was meant to solve. This is the first stage of drift. The system no longer asks, "Is this solving the original issue?" It asks, "Is this compliant with the rules?" Rules, once tools, become the objective. This shift is rarely questioned because it feels rational. Procedures create predictability. Predictability creates stability. Stability feels safe. And safety is one of the most powerful psychological incentives humans respond to. People inside the system adapt quickly. They learned how to navigate it, how to succeed within it, how to avoid friction. Over time, competence within the system becomes more valuable than alignment with its purpose. At this point, loyalty shifts. Individuals stop serving the original mission and start serving the structure itself. Not because they are unethical, but because the system rewards those who do. Incentives matter more than ideals. Always. A system may claim to value fairness, efficiency, or service. But if promotions, recognition, and survival depend on something else, compliance, speed, obedience, or risk avoidance, those traits will dominate behavior. The system does not need to be enforced aggressively. It enforces itself through incentives. As this happens, something else emerges. Identity. Roles within the system become identities. Titles become meaning. Careers become self-worth. Questioning the system feels less like critical thinking and more like personal threat these days. The system no longer needs justification. It feels natural, inevitable, permanent. This is where the original purpose becomes increasingly abstract. People still reference it. They invoke it in language, ceremonies, and public messaging. But it no longer guides decisions. It serves as symbolic legitimacy rather than operational reality. History is filled with examples of this pattern. Institutions, created to protect, gradually prioritize, control. Organizations built to serve eventually optimize for self-preservation. Structures, designed to reduce chaos, slowly generate rigidity. The drift is not accidental. It is structural. As systems mature, they begin to optimize for their own survival. This is not conscious self-interest, but systemic momentum. Resources flow toward maintaining the structure. Feedback that threatens stability is resisted. Reform is perceived as a risk. Some of these ideas can't be fully explored. In short videos, I've put a deeper and more connected version of this analysis into a written format. If you're interested in exploring these patterns more carefully, the book is linked in the description. Complexity amplifies this effect. When systems become complex, responsibility becomes diffused. Decisions are distributed across departments, committees, and processes. No single individual feels accountable for outcomes. Everyone follows the rules. Yet the outcome feels detached from intention. This diffusion protects the system from moral scrutiny. Harm becomes procedural. Inefficiency becomes normalized. Criticism becomes misunderstanding. And because the system still functions at least partially, there is no clear moment of failure. Drift is gradual. From the inside, it feels like professionalism. From the outside, it feels like alienation. Eventually, the system reaches a point where changing course becomes almost impossible without disruption. Its size, complexity, and dependencies create inertia. Even when people recognize misalignment, they struggle to act. The cost of change feels higher than the cost of continuation at T stage. Systems often justify themselves by expanding their scope. When the original purpose no longer sustains legitimacy, new objectives are introduced. New language emerges. New missions are declared. This is not evolution in the true sense. It is adaptation for survival. An adaptation without reflection tends to repeat the same patterns. The most dangerous aspect of systemic drift is not inefficiency or control. It is invisibility. People living inside drifting systems rarely perceive them as such. The changes happen slowly, normalized through routine. Each step feels reasonable in isolation. Only in retrospect does the transformation become clear. This is why systems rarely collapse, because people suddenly wake up. They collapse when accumulated rigidity meets external pressure. When reality changes faster than the system can adapt. But collapse is not the inevitable outcome. Some systems do transform. The difference lies in awareness. Systems that retain the capacity for reflection, those that periodically reassess incentives, simplify complexity, and reconnect decisions to original purpose, have a chance to realign. Those that cannot tend to harden. Understanding this pattern does not grant control over systems, but it does grant clarity. Clarity allows individuals to distinguish between intention and outcome, between language and structure, between purpose and preservation. And while clarity alone does not change systems, it changes perception. When perception changes, blind adaptation slows. Automatic compliance weakens. Questions become possible again. Systems drift, not because people stop caring, but because structures continue moving long after their direction should have been. Question. To notice the drift is not to stand outside the system. No one does. It is simply to see it. And seeing clearly, while subtle, is often the first step toward anything meaningful.